So I'm back today with another top 10, and this time I thought I would talk about horror films with tone shifts. These are all films that take an unexpected turn. It could be that they change genre, or it could just be that there is something that you were just not expecting that happens. I'm not going to be saying any spoilers in this video. I'm not going to be telling you what the twists are. Please bear in mind I am going to be telling you what films have plot twists and tone shifts. So if you don't even want to know that, then this video probably isn't for you. But if you don't mind knowing that a film has a twist and you are maybe looking for some films that take you by surprise, then hopefully you can find some new films from this list. The first film is Significant Other. This follows a couple that go on a backpacking trip through the Pacific Northwest. But during their journey, they begin to notice some strange things and realise that they aren't alone in the woods. This stars Micah Monroe, who is incredible in horror and thriller films. She is in It Follows, she is in Watcher, and quite a few films in the genre now. I do feel like this is a film that she's in that not many people talk about. I really couldn't predict what was going to happen in this film at all. I went in completely blind. There was a lot of beautiful scenery because this is all shot in nature. I did find this a lot of fun. It was very genre bending. It was really well acted, and it is quite a short film at being only 85 minutes long, which I think works quite well because for me personally, I did prefer the first half. I felt the second half, the pacing was slightly off. It did start to lose me in the second half, but overall it was a pretty solid watch. Next is a film that came out last year, and that is Strange Darling. This follows a one-night stand that goes wrong, causing a series of bloody events to follow. So this film is done in chapters, but the chapters aren't done in a linear order. So we don't start off with the first chapter. We have no idea what is happening because we are basically just pushed right into the action. It did feel really engaging. It's almost like when you read a thriller book and you start off with the prologue being something that's like completely in the middle of the book, right in the action. It is very well paced from the start. One of the main leads is Kyle Gallner. He is in quite a few horror films. He is always really good in the genre. One of his more recent roles was in Smile, so you may recognise him from that. Strange Darling did have a nice bit of gore, and it also had some disturbing themes. It's definitely a film that you won't forget. Next on the list we have Barbarian. A woman arrives at an Airbnb after a long day, only to find out it has been double booked and there is already a man staying there. Against her better judgment, she decides to stay the night anyway. Barbarian has an incredible cast. It does star Justin Long as one of the main leads, and he's one of my favourite actors in horror. He is always getting himself into some sort of situation. He plays quite a similar role in a lot of films that he's in. This also stars Georgina Campbell and Bill Skarsgård. This is a horror comedy, but the comedy is more satire. It's very aware of itself and plays into the horror tropes in a hilarious way. It is also really creepy at times. Honestly, seeing this at the cinema, some parts scared the absolute life out of me. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Not only does the film have a tone shift, but it also is really good at quickly switching the audience's emotions. Next up we have From Dusk Till Dawn. This is an older film, so I am aware that most people probably already know the shift in this film. Even if you haven't seen this film, then you probably know what it's about. If you are lucky enough to not know much about this film and you haven't seen it, then watch it and go in blind because you will be in for a treat. After a crime spree, brothers are on the run from the police. They decide to hold up at a truck stop to lay low, but it ends up being a decision they quickly regret. This is definitely the most action-based film on this list. It does have quite a straightforward story, but there is so much going on. It is very chaotic. There's also quite a bit of gore and some really cool effects. George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino do play the two main brothers. This is the oldest film in the list, coming out in the 90s, and it's also one of the longest at being nearly 2 hours long. Next we have Fresh. Noah is sick of dating apps and first dates that just lead nowhere. She has almost given up until she meets Steve at the grocery store. They get talking and one thing leads to another. Steve asks Noah if she wants to take a trip away with him. She agrees, but their trip ends up being anything but ideal. This is another horror comedy. This is more on the light-hearted side, even though the themes of the film are quite disturbing and dark. The script and the way the film is presented does make these things not as dark, and it presents itself in a way that is more of an easy watch. This film is really well casted. I couldn't imagine it with anyone else. Like with many on the list, the trailer and the marketing really does spoil the main surprise. So with all of these films, I am only showing parts of the trailers to try not to spoil anything. When I first saw this film, I actually watched it again the next day because I loved it so much. The characters are also likable and interesting. Even the ones that we aren't supposed to like as much, you do end up kind of liking everyone because of how much depth all these characters have. This film does feel very modern. It uses things like dating apps. I'm sure a lot of people can find it quite relatable. Next up, we have One Cut of the Dead. On the set of a low-budget zombie film, the crew end up having to fight for their lives as they get attacked by real zombies. When I first started watching this film, I was very confused. I was kind of like, what am I watching and why is this so highly rated? But it is one that you just have to stick with. You just have to keep watching because not everything is as it seems, and this film just completely takes a turn. One Cut of the Dead quickly became one of my favourite zombie films. It is just such a unique take on the subgenre, and it also has some really funny moments as well. This is definitely one that is genre bending for sure. It is a little bit on the longer side and the first bit is very confusing, but please just stick with this one. Give this one some time and I promise you this film is really good. Next up, we have The Cabin in the Woods. This follows 5 college friends that go away to a cabin in the woods for a getaway, but when they get there, they slowly start to realise the cabin isn't what it seems. When talking about horror films that are aware of themselves, this is the film that is most aware of itself. This film is very centered around horror cliches. It is a lot of fun and it did do a lot for the horror genre in being so different, in playing on the horror tropes, being so aware of itself and just having such a bonkers ending. We see so many of these elements that this film brought, especially in films in the last 10-15 years. Of course, these things existed in films before this film, but it wasn't so present in the horror genre, and I do think this film plays a big part in a lot of horror films that we see nowadays. There is so much to look at. You will notice different things on each rewatch. When I first watched this film, I was very confused and I wasn't a massive fan, but I have learned to really appreciate it, and I do think it was incredibly ahead of its time. I feel like it can be much more appreciated now than it was back when it was released. That's the case for me anyway. Next up, we have a film that was just released, and that is Companion. Companion follows a group of friends who go on a getaway to one of their lake houses, and something ends up going wrong, causing a series of unfortunate events to follow. I have just done a whole video on this film, so I'm not going to talk about it for too long. If you do want to know more of my thoughts about this film, then you can watch my recent review. Companion is a horror comedy. It has a lot of the same people that worked on Barbarian working on this film, which you can see through the comedy and through the twists. It does have some gore. It is quite genre bending, and as I said in my recent review, unfortunately it is heavily spoiled by its own trailers. Even though I had seen the trailer, so I did know what was coming, I still highly enjoyed this film and it will be one that I will rewatch over and over. Next, we have a film called Kill List. This is a film that I only actually watched last year. I can't believe it took me so long to watch it. If you like the film The Ritual, then I think you will really like this film because that is the only film I can really think to compare it to. Kill List does have some really disturbing scenes and it has some really realistic gore. I am used to a lot of gore because I watch a lot of horror films, but in this film there were moments where I had to look away because the gore was so intense, unexpected and so realistic. The practical effects are incredible. In Kill List, we follow a hitman and his colleague as they take on a new assignment. They are promised a big payoff for 3 killings, but there is more to this job than they anticipated. This is the only film in this list that doesn't have a shift halfway through. It is more towards the end, but it is a shift that I wasn't expecting at all. It does change the whole subgenre of the film and it really amps the horror elements up. There There are parts of this film that are really shocking and very disturbing, so please bear that in mind. Next we have The Perfect Host. This is a film that came out in 2010 and I watched it around the time that it came out. I just randomly saw it on streaming services and decided to give it a go. I don't really see too many people speak about this film. Going in blind was such a roller coaster and I'm so glad that I didn't know anything about it before I saw it. So in The Perfect Host we follow a criminal who is on the run and he turns up at the door of a man who is throwing a dinner party. He claims to be a friend of a friend to try and make his way in, and the host does end up letting him in, but of course he is throwing a dinner party, so the criminal has to stay whilst the dinner party takes place. This film isn't too long and it is thoroughly entertaining the whole way through. There are moments that really keep you guessing. It's very engaging. It is kind of a crime thriller with horror elements, and I hope that because I haven't really heard many people talk about this, maybe a lot of people can go into this blind. It isn't too disturbing and does have limited gore. It's definitely nowhere near as gory as some of the other films on this list, and it definitely is a lot more light-hearted than some of the other ones on this list. So if you don't know where to start, then this could be the perfect film to start with. It's not the highest budget film, it's not the highest production film, but it is a film that you can have a lot of fun with. It's not too hard of a watch and it is something just a little bit different that not many people know about. So there are 10 horror films that have some unexpected twists and tone shifts. These are just some of my favourites that I can think of on the top of my head that have taken me by surprise, or ones that I just thought were really cleverly done. If you have any other suggestions of horror films with tone shifts or unexpected twists, then please let me know in the comments, because I would love to add more to this list and find some more that I haven't seen before. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you again in the next one.